Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. We are privileged today to have Dr. Laura Suttin join us. And Dr. Suttin, Laura, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. So I am a family physician and I live in Texas with my family. I am a coach and a consultant and author and speaker as well. I own my own business, Purposeful MD, and I love what I do. I get to coach physicians. I get to work with physicians and medical organizations, all with the goal of wiping physician burnout off the map. I love it. It lights me up.
That is so cool. I love that mantra. We are wiping physician burnout off the map, and I think it was sort of a buzzword, and then people kind of get to really live, unfortunately, what burnout feels like, and you get to that kind of dark, bad place of burnout. And I love that we have more national attention to it. And I think that's pretty cool that you've personally made it one of your missions to try to wipe that out and make it so people don't have to go through that, and try to find a way to leave the profession better than we found it, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, walk me through your journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll just start talking and feel free to interrupt if
Yeah.
you want to take something else. So I've always wanted to be in medicine. I've always loved working with other people and helping others, and I always also loved the science of it. And being a doctor really just felt like the best combination of the two. So I decided that pretty early on, probably high school, and I think a lot of us who I went, I guess, the more traditional route, college, straight to med school, straight to residency. I think on that path, you have to decide pretty early because we have to pick a major that's going to help us get into medical school. And when I was in medical school, I was really drawn to primary care and family medicine. We were talking before we hit record, just this notion of being able to do lots of different things and help patients in a lot of different ways. I love the variety. And I also love the connection with patients. I think that comes through in my coaching now because I love connecting with my clients in the same way. So, did a 3-year family medicine residency and joined a small private practice after residency. I didn't want to join a large health system at the time, even though that's what ended up happening, but joined a small private practice. I was the first doctor that my boss hired. And I loved that job. It was a small clinic. We really worked as a team. And a couple years after I joined, he sold his practice to a large health system.
Oh, so therefore now you
And
work for a large health system.
now I work for a large health system. I was really nervous about that. It ended up working out really well for me and being a very good opportunity. So I joined, well, it wasn't as large as it was when we joined. It grew, and now it's part of Optum. And so I was with that company for 14 years. Like I said, it ended up being a really good opportunity because it's really what taught me how to be a leader, how to be self-aware, how to step into this role that I'm in now. I did a lot of professional development in that world, became a physician leader pretty early on. Also around that time, I went through a divorce. My daughter's father and I divorced. She was born my 3rd year of residency. And so that was, of course, a life-altering experience.
Mm.
And that was really going on around the same time. I was doing a lot of professional development. So it kind of came to a head all at once. In that process, I started working with a coach. And as part of a professional development program that I was in, I was actually assigned an executive coach. And I had never worked with a coach before, didn't know what it was. I thought it was going to be like therapy, which I was going through at the time as well. And my coach was phenomenal. I still actually work with her today. And she taught me what coaching is and also taught me the power that it can have and really helped me to not just her giving me the confidence, but her showing me that I have the confidence within myself and showing me that I know what I need to know. I have everything that I need to have within me and really validating my experience at the same time. So it was just so transformative for me. I wouldn't be where I am without having gone through that. Um, then probably about 5, 6 years later, I had a pretty traumatic professional setback within my leadership role. And it helped me it forced me to really reflect on what's important to me. What is the impact that I want to have on the world? That was right before COVID hit, which of course, I know a lot of us went through this sort of what's important type existential process, and I certainly did. My father passed away right around that same time, so again, a lot of other things coming to a head. But that was when I decided that I wanted to be a coach. I'd done some informal coaching and mentoring throughout my work and throughout my role as a senior leader within this organization. And just again, similar to primary care connecting with patients, I loved sitting in front of a physician and just sharing the space with them, helping them to unpack, hey, what's going on? What can I do to support you? What do you need in this moment? It was just so incredibly powerful for me and still is. And a colleague of mine was going through a coach training. I didn't even know that was really a thing. And so I looked for a coach training that fit with me, completed the coach training, started my business, and yeah, here I am.
Well,
I can keep going from
like
there.
I know it's like
So
in a really encapsulated little nutshell. That's a
yeah,
huge breadth of experiences. I mean, and Laura, like it's I appreciate you sharing that because it's the personal things that define us. Like you talk about being a mom and going through a life change with a divorce and having a leadership role, and then having that kind of taken from you, and then the death of a parent. I mean, I think that stuff is what life is about, is you're trying to kind
right.
of navigate these complicated, challenging experiences that we all, people get to live these difficult, challenging things. And you still have to kind of figure out how to be a healer in the middle of that, because that's what your
Yeah.
job is. You're a doctor, you're a healer. That's what all of us have kind of felt like a calling to go. Most people go to medical school because they want to say, that's the title of the podcast, I want to make a difference. I want to do things that really help people. And I think it's pretty hard in sometimes when you're going through something that would normally be kind of a personal challenge or personal kind of crisis moment, and still show up at work every day saying, okay, but I'm here to help you. How did you navigate that? Think back to some of those tricky times, because you're a full-time doctor, you're a mom, we all have these relationships that sort of define who we are.
Yeah. I mean, thinking through my divorce, I I had to lean on the people around me. I mean, I think whenever there's a crisis, you really realize who are the people in your corner. And I had to let them carry some of it for me. I think as physicians, a lot of times it's hard for us to do that. We feel like, well, I have to carry this. This is my problem. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to show others that I need them. At least I felt that. And I knew that I had to. I had to lean on some of my work colleagues to just help me keep my brain straight. Some of it was just, hey, help me th think through this so I'm not missing anything. Help me with this next project that I'm working on. And then it was with friends, just when they call up and say, "Hey, can I just come over and sit with you?" Then I would say, "Yes, come over. Let's just share space together." So really letting people in, and but also making sure I was being I know Brene Brown talks about this a lot, being selective about who you let in. That was something that was important for me too. So that definitely helped me with both the divorce and the death of my dad. My dad died in August of 2020, so it was a little bit harder in that time frame just because of COVID. I couldn't go and hug the people that I might have been hugging
Right.
normally. But definitely still relying on my community, relying on the people around me to just say, "Hey, I need help, and I'm not going to get through this alone." Just letting people in, letting people help and support, because we have to sometimes we have to let other people fill our cup for us.
Yeah, well, and I think, as I think about my own experiences and I talk to other doctors, that is kind of a hard thing sometimes as a physician. This podcast is for doctors, and I think everybody listening will relate. You say, okay, I have a hard time. I've got something crazy going on at home, and I have to still show up here. And you almost feel like bad or disappointed in yourself or guilt or whatever the proper descriptor is. You feel you feel reluctant to ask other people for help and say, "Hey, now it's my turn to need help." And so that's an interesting thing to kind of reflect on. Do you have any advice if you were to go back to give Laura Sutton advice at yourself advice back those years ago? What would you tell yourself?
I feel like I handled it as well as I could at the time. I think with the skills that I had, with the people that I had in my life, I don't know if I would have done anything differently. I think um, it just really taught me that there are times when I need to take care of myself and not to neglect that. And not to rush through it also, not to rush through the stages and the process. I was talking with somebody the other day and I don't quite remember um what the life challenge was that we were talking about, but just taking 12 to 24 months really to process and let something like that, let yourself kind of come back to whatever your normal was before the event happened. Um, I think having been through it now, I can say, yeah, we don't we can't rush those types of events. We can't rush our healing. We can't rush the process because everything has its own natural course and natural time frame.
Yeah, and I'm sure that influences your coaching strategies a little bit today. I was talking
Yeah.
to one of my patients the other day who had gone through some similar stuff to what you're describing. Her father had died when she was in her I think she was in her late 30s, early 40s, and she had little kids, and she was kind of suddenly the she was sort of the grown up in the family, so to speak,
Hmm.
among siblings and kids, and there really was not a chance. At least she didn't feel like she could stop and mourn and take the time. She was like, "Oh, we just have to be tough. We have to be tough." And now, all these years later, suddenly that inability to express those emotions and go through the steps of mourning and resolution and kind of defining your own personal narrative to say, this is who I am, I can overcome hard things. She had not done it. And so years later had to deal with it. And I think there's a lot of challenges in life that you go through. And if you don't go through the process, you try to skirt around it, it'll come back and get you at some point because our brains have to deal with trauma and disappointment, and it's just such an interesting thing that we share that. I think every human on earth has some need to kind of deal with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely tell when there were times, again, not having been through either of these scenarios, I could definitely tell where there were times when I either found myself trying to rush through the situation um or trying to tell myself, well, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be over this by now, all those types of things
All the shoulds.
all the shoulds, all the shoulds.
Yeah, that's one I think all of us have to kind of look back and say, okay, should is not really something that I should put in my vocabulary,
Yes.
because that is somebody from who in our brain kind of shaming us or telling us that we can't feel this thing, or you should not feel guilty, or you should be more productive, or yada yada. And there's plenty of things that we can do to kind of meet our personal goals and meet the expectations of those around us or things that we've set for ourselves. But sometimes people get into the blame game. I always tell people guilt's for sin. Don't
Yes.
don't use guilt inappropriately. In other words,
Yes.
if you've robbed the bank, you should feel guilty. But if you
Yes.
didn't do something exactly on time because you had some other important thing come up in your life, try not to put guilt in there because that's really not what that's for.
Yeah, I had a coach tell me very similar once, guilt is for criminals. And I was
Right.
like, oh, yeah, I'm not a criminal. So
Yeah.
don't need to feel guilty.
Yeah, so because guilt sometimes is put in religious context, and like, okay, guilt was for sin. If you
Yeah,
lied and stole and cheated, you probably should
yeah,
feel guilty. But
yeah,
outside of that,
yeah,
that's not. We really shouldn't use that sentiment for our normal day-to-day activities.
yeah, yeah.
Well, so Laura, kind of walk me through this development process. So you're a family doctor like I am. You have this broad uh, interest and you have all this experience for being a family doctor for a lot of years. You had this opportunity to be in leadership roles, which is pretty cool. You had that. And then you decided to transition, to writing a book and podcasting and coaching. Are you still in clinical practice with patients, or have you switched over completely, or what's your practice look like now?
Yeah, I took a little bit of a break with clinical practice and realized I missed it, and so I'm back into clinical practice. So I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's why I became a doctor, and so
Right.
yeah,
Can you work
yeah.
a little bit more on your own terms now?
Yes, definitely. I work with a relatively large clinic group here in town, and so PRN, I fill in where needed, like doctors taking time off, that type of
Yeah.
thing. So
But you can
yeah,
also say no when you want to say no.
exactly.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Well, we talked about burnout at the beginning, and I it you don't get as burned out when it's easy to say no. At
Hmm.
least that's my observation. The times I've felt like the burnout, kind of it's when I feel trapped. I don't feel like there's time to take care of myself or my family, etc. And so if you can make your career to a place where you can say, I'll be there because I want to be, not because I have to be, you can do it for the joy of it. Um, how's that influenced the kind of your perspective on burnout?
Well, it's helped me when I am at this crossroads or feeling the pressure of somebody asking me to do something, and again, back to the shoulds, like, well, I could do this, but it's probably not going to bring me joy. It doesn't align with my priorities or my values. It's not going to help my business, not going to help my family, all of those kinds of things. And so being really clear on what is important to us. One of the things that I talk about this in the book too, and with my coaching clients, really knowing what our values are, what our core values are. And those can change at any point in life. But if we are clear on our core values in the moment, it really just helps us to eliminate a lot of this decision making. We have to make so many decisions all day long. If we can reduce the number of decisions we have to make because of our core values, then we're living in alignment with those values, and it just is frictionless. So, for instance, my daughter is graduating high school in exactly 1 month from today.
Congrats.
And thanks. And she's going off to college far away from me, which is, she's going to her dream school, super excited for her. Um, and so knowing that this was my last year with her at home for the time being, I'm intentionally made a lot of decisions around my business and my personal life about what I would and wouldn't do so that I could prioritize time with her. So knowing, I mean, I set that intention about a year ago. And so that's just helped me when I get, oh, this conference is coming up or this or that, then I can remember, oh yeah, I'm prioritizing time with her for this time. Then it just helps me to make those decisions. So if we know what we value and know what is important to us, then we don't have to fret as much about those decisions because we've already outlined it. We've already created that foundation for ourselves.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, it's hard to do because, like you said, you have so many decisions. And if we all knew our core values and kind of what's our purpose and why are we doing this, it would be easier to make those decisions in the moment. But how do you suggest that? I found in my busiest times, it's hard to set aside time to reflect or maybe even write down those values or what's most important to me in this particular chapter of life or for this next year. Like sometimes my wife and I will sit down, we'll have these conversations about where we're going and what's important, but how do how do you recommend for people to do that? Because you're in the middle of a busy career and you need to have that alignment, like you described. But how do you do it?
Yeah, there are so many different methods. I think the simplest one is ask Google or Chat GPT or your favorite search engine for a list of common core values. Look at the list, pick out a few between 3 and 5 that speak to you the most, and ask yourself, am I objectively living in alignment with those values? And it's not to at least to get started, you want to know really where you are, not necessarily where you want to be. So the example that I like to use is if I put nature on my list and I'm not doing anything to spend time in nature, I live in a high rise in Manhattan. that just might be where I am, but I'm not living in alignment with that nature. Um, and so being really clear on, is there an opportunity there? Maybe one of my core values is something that I'm not expressing enough in my life. Is there an opportunity within my behavior to bring that in more? And we have to be intentional about it. We're all incredibly busy. And unless we set aside time and be intentional and purposeful about it, then it just doesn't happen. I was watching a funny video about like life as an adult, and it was a man saying to his friend in the distance, "Oh yeah, let's get together next week." And then the punchline was, "They're never going to get together." It's the same way with people that are closest to us. If we want to spend time with the people in our lives, it doesn't just happen. We have to be intentional about it. And it's the same thing for ourselves. We have to, our behavior has to, if there's no intention behind it, then we just drift. And then we
Yeah.
find ourselves in this place where we're like, how did I end up here?
No, that is a good point. I like the idea of writing it down, or you can use a search engine, whatever it is, to kind of write those things out. And I've seen that exercise where you say, what does it look like now, and what do I want it to look like, and try to find alignment between those, and then take some concrete steps to say, well, I can't fix it immediately, but over the next year or the next month or the next week, however, whatever timeline, I'm going to make these little steps so that these moments become, the moments create up the reality, and I'm going to use those little moments to try to make my reality look more like what I think it should look like.
Yes, yes, yeah. I mean, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which I no affiliation from it, but it's been such a good book for me, so transformative. I recommend that to a lot of folks to really start to build those the system of behaviors and daily habits that can help towards that identity or life that we really want. So.
Yeah. Well, what inspired you? You have all these experiences. What inspired you to write a book? And tell people about this book, the Purposeful MD.
Yeah. So the book is called Purposeful MD, Creating the Life You Love Without Guilt. It's available anywhere you get books, in print, ebook, and the Audible, or the audiobook just came out, Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. So
Oh,
really
nice.
happy about that. Um, so I started writing in a blog format probably about 2 or 3 years ago. It was part of an internal blog within my organization, and I would basically blog once a week. And I was coaching at the time, so it was on topics that came up in my coaching or things that would come up for me, that insights that I had had, and it would go out organizational wide on this on our email platform. And I found that I really enjoyed it, and I was getting good feedback from people saying, "Hey, this really helped me, and thanks for this reminder." And this was just really impactful for me. So I thought maybe this is something that could be impactful on a larger scale. Writing a book is something that I had thought about years ago, but I think, like a lot of physicians, we have this whisper voice inside of our head, or doing things outside of medicine, that we might be like, nah, that's never going to happen. So for me, writing a book was one of those that I thought was never going to happen. And the coach I was working with at the time had written books, and so she was tremendous in helping me through the process. Through other connections and friends, I got introduced to a writing coach, and so basically, I took all these blogs that I had done, and over probably about an 18-month process with lots of different drafts, turned them into the book, and it came out last October. My goal for writing the book was I mean, the subtitle, Creating the Life You Love Without Guilt. We kind of talked about this too. Guilt is not required. And I strongly believe that every physician has what they need, has the fortitude and everything that they have within them to truly create a life they love without guilt. And so I talk about my own experience in the book. I talked about experiences of my clients. And then the book is really about, okay, let's take these concepts that we've discussed, and let's put them into action, because nothing happens outside of action. If we're just reading about concepts, taking in new information, it's great, but what are you doing differently with it? That's same thing I do with my coaching clients is what are you doing differently as a result of these insights? So it's very much action oriented, lots of journaling prompts. So I really want it to be something that almost like a guide you could kind of go
Hmm.
to. I want to talk about setting boundaries or talk about managing my emotions or kind of revisit that chapter. And so each chapter can be read and acted upon in and of itself.
Well, congratulations on having that big long process, 18 months, and then you actually published it. Sounds like it's doing marvelously. And a lot of the things we've already discussed, you can put real life experience to kind of back up those principles. And I like that idea of removing guilt as one of the motivators. Try to live a full life because the thing we can never get more of is time. No matter
Right.
what you do, you can't get more time. So choosing how you spend it and making it so that you can choose how you spend it should be the quest, of humanity, but especially I think physicians, because everybody wants a piece of your time.
Right. And there is this feeling among a lot of physicians about feeling stuck, like you said, like we don't have control over our time. And there's so many external factors that are at play that make physicians feel that way. And the only way out is if we as physicians don't put up with it anymore any
Right,
longer,
right.
right?
That's it.
And so because the current system is working because it's working, but it's not working for us, and it's not. I mean, patients are unhappy too. I don't think, yeah, when, we don't have to. That's we could go down that if you want to as well. Just all the challenges within healthcare today. Um, but when we stand up and realize our own power and what we truly have to offer to the world, that's where the magic happens. And so even feeling stuck is an awful feeling and it is a choice because we don't have to feel stuck because we're not. And so I love to reframe this for clients and I need it for myself too, is everything that we do is a choice. Even we don't have to pay taxes. We will go to jail
Right, you get the
when something
consequence
bad.
for that choice.
There's consequences, but everything that we do is a choice. And so I think just remembering that, again, for me, it's incredibly helpful. And a lot of what I write about, even still in my social media and emails, is something that has occurred to me that day, or an insight that I was reminded of, or an insight that I had when working with my own coach. So I even had a client this morning asking me, how long did it take you to figure all this stuff out? And I said, oh, I'm still figuring it out. Like none of us ever have it all figured out. And I'm learning right along with my clients. And so that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, we are all a work in progress. I don't think it would
Yes.
be appropriate to say like, "Oh, I've got it all figured out." Even with patients, even if you're not coaching, if you're taking care of somebody that's coming in with a health problem, I always just try to say, "Well, nobody studied you. We have all these studies we can draw from, but let's take this information, extrapolate it, and try to find out a plan that's going to work for you and for your
Yeah.
life." And it's much the same for ourselves. We have to say, "Okay, this is the cards that I've been dealt. This is where I live. This is the family situation that I'm in. What can I do to be the best version of what I possibly could be?" But
Yes.
I want to kind of back just for a second on that power that you've kind of discovered within physicians. They're just if we speak with a united voice, we can leave it better than we found it. Medicine in
Yes.
general. I think we can say, look, we don't have to be constrained by all these external things, and you just have to be able to say no to the things that really don't make much sense for patient care and yes to the things that we know really move the needle on helping our patients be better and making sure that the healers, the doctors, and the rest of the healthcare team still show up to work every day saying, I'm ready to help. No, I'm not burned out. I'm not stressed out of my mind. I'm here to help. And that's a real powerful shift.
Absolutely. I love the way you said that. Leave it better than we found it. I think a lot of at least in what I've seen, a lot of our mentality comes from what we were taught by our attendings, the residents when we were students. And there's this notion of, well, this was done to me, so it's going to have to be done to you. All the talk about work hour restrictions and there are some huge generational shifts and should physicians work a 24-hour shift? And we have the younger physicians, well, that's inhumane. And then older physicians, again, I'm generalizing, but a lot of older physicians, well, I had to do it, so they have to do it too. And then there's well, is there somewhere in between where we have a workforce and supply demand mismatch? So I think there's this huge mentality of, and it's not conscious necessarily, but this is how I was treated, so this is how the younger physicians that are coming after me are going to be treated. And we just have to break that cycle because it's not necessary. We don't have to treat each other like we're robots. We don't have to deny our own needs for food and sleep and going to the bathroom and taking care of our biology. I mean, so yeah, I mean, even I see this in corporate environments too. It's like I work with executives and they have back to back to back meetings and like and I'm seeing them apologizing to use the bathroom or apologizing for eating. And I'm like,
You're
you
not a
don't,
robot.
right. You have to eat. And so I think we have this mentality that, well, I don't need proper nourishment. I don't need sleep. I don't need a healthy movement. I don't, we think we're above that somehow. And that's just not the case. We have to take care of ourselves and we have to set the example. So that's something that's really part of my mission too, is I have to be an example for the people that I'm coaching, for my family, my friends. And I say that not as in a self-centered way, but just that I have to walk the walk and talk the talk,
Hmm.
just like I'm advocating for other people to do.
Yeah, I think sometimes our training, it's almost, you can almost compare it to some of the military stuff where it's mission first and self-care second. And it's good to have mission first. We want patient outcomes to be excellent. We want to make sure that when we show up, a patient knows that you've been adequately trained and you've had the experience of sitting with somebody while they're going through a health challenge right in the middle of the night with low resource environments, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have to do it in a way that is not it doesn't beat people up or make people mean at the end of it. At the end of that process, you should come out as a healer and say, I've got a skill set and I can use this to help you. But
Yeah.
if we don't if we don't make it any better, it doesn't get any better. So I am pleased that there are a lot of efforts, and I trying to make it better for those who are kind of the rising class of physicians and people that are going through that now. But I also recognize the need to make sure there's good quality. So I think this effort is something that physicians need to lead. It shouldn't be led by people who have not done it. It really ought to be led by us, by doctors, because they're the ones who are charged with patient care. And if we put it in the hands of business executives and legislators, often it's kind of a mismatch.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we know best. And just because there's different schools of thought, different ways of thinking, that doesn't mean that we can't all sit down and at least try to hammer out what do we think is going to be a solution that is going to work for us, given the constraints that we're in and given the environment that we're in. But I think just fighting with each other that's not an answer.
No. When I think about burnout, the one of the things that I've observed that drives is people graduate from medical school and they have all these hopes and expectations, and you go to residency, and the reality is you have a six-figure debt. You have a non-compete contract that says you can't move. You can't. We basically own you for multiple years after your contract is over. We have somebody out at an outside place that says this is how much you're allowed to make for what you do, and you're not allowed to make more than that because the system says that, and you need to work for somebody else until this is all paid off, and we expect you to show up when you're told, or you lose your job and you have to move your family because you have a non-compete. Like, that's the reality that some people face. And so when you come into it like that, people feel disillusioned. They say, I went in to make a difference, but now I feel like I'm in a cog in somebody else's machine. And to gain that power back and gain that voice and that autonomy, what have you discovered along the way to help people to face those realities and still feel like they have power so that they don't get trapped in that burnout cycle.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a lot at play in those situations. And I think, and I've worked with clients that are facing something like that. I think some of it is, okay, what's the reality of the situation? What are the things that are outside of my control? And then what are the things that are within my control? And if I don't know the difference between the two, it's like the serenity prayer, right? Courage to change the things I can, serenity to accept what I can't, and then the wisdom to know the difference.
Hmm.
Well, who can I lean on? And this goes back to what we were talking about before. Who's in my corner? Who are my resources? Are there people that have worked for this company already and can help me to navigate? Is there a healthcare attorney, a tax accountant, somebody that is fighting for me and advocating for me that can help me to understand, okay, this is pretty standard in a physician contract. This is not. This is something that we really want to try to negotiate. But knowing, at least knowing what you're up against, knowing kind of what's reality and what's not. And then something that I ask my physician clients, I go have them go through this exercise when they're worried about something is say, what are you worried about that would happen? And then they say, well, I'm worried I would lose my job. Well, then what are you worried about? And that sounds like an obvious question. Like, well, yeah, of course it's horrible to lose my job. And then they might say, well, I'm worried I wouldn't be able to support my family. Well, then what are you worried about? Well, that we'd have to, and then they start to think about like, well, you know, I'd probably be able to find another job somewhere. I could pick up some shifts. There's an ER down the street. We might have to cut back on some things. But it wouldn't be the end of the world. And so going through that exercise, I think can be really helpful because we tend to go down this like, oh, the worst is going to happen. We're going to be living in a box on the street. And that I mean, never say never, but that's typically not the case. There's usually some form of backup or, physicians are resourceful, right? And so even just planning out, okay, what if this job doesn't work out? I was talking with a resident earlier this month, and I don't know what the stats are now, but I know a lot of residents leave their first job after a few years out of training. And so I was talking with this third year resident. She was talking about this job opportunity and I mentioned that statistic to her. I said, I don't want you to think about this as a job that you're going to just leave in a few years. Just know that this might not be the place where you spend your career, and that's okay. Um, I think when I was coming out, there were a lot of us who were still in this mentality of, oh, this is where I'm going to grow, develop my career. I'm going to spend 30 years at this company. 20 somethings now are not thinking that for sure. And so I think I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but as a Gen Xer, and a lot of my clients we still have that mentality of, I can't leave this job. What am I going to do? And so that's where somebody like a coach or even a mentor or a colleague can help you bounce things off of um and just to like reframe what's reality, what's not, and is there a different way I can look at this? Because there's always something in there that we can control, even if it's just our attitude about the situation. So we have to make the choice. If I'm presented with these terms, are they something I can live with? And if not, am I willing to walk away?
Yeah, I love that mental exercise of saying, well, if not that, then what? And then what? And then what? Because really, if you're a physician and you've gone through that training, you really do actually carry all the cards. Like you have an
Hmm.
employer, and if that doesn't work, then there'll be somebody else, and you can start something else. I mean, you aren't really as helpless as you might think you are. And if you are so dissatisfied with the income and so dissatisfied with the work culture or for whatever you like, I mean, you can vote with your feet and say,
Hmm.
I will go somewhere else.
Right.
And certainly you don't want to just be willy-nilly about job commitment. But if there's a job that you love, you have to, I think every job you have to look and say, well, what are the top 10 things I love? And maybe what are the top 10 things I don't love? And try to balance it and say, because there's not some perfect balance. There's no such thing as achieving perfect balance. You simply say, I've found a place where the good outweighs the bad and the happy moments outweigh the difficult moments, and I've
Yeah.
found a place where I feel like I can fit in and make a difference. And if that balance changes and I no longer like it here, well, I'll start looking elsewhere. And that is the power you have.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and non-compete contracts are kind of a different discussion altogether. But I think we tend to let them have power over us, maybe in a way that they should not.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And that's where somebody like a good attorney in your corner can be really, really helpful.
Oh yeah. Well, so you talked about at the beginning that you are on a quest to knock out burnout, to get rid of it,
Yes.
and I love that. What are the concrete steps you think that we need to make as doctors, or maybe even in our policy making as a nation, so that we don't have a next generation of doctors who are experiencing these huge high rates of burnout?
Well, I'm seeing the stigma of I I would use the term mental health, and I don't mean that to mean pathology, but I see the stigma around seeking support for mental and emotional health. I see that stigma, those walls starting to come down, which I think is huge. So, I mean, as a nation, policy, advocacy, legislation, removing any stigma around seeking support, whether that's professional, any type of support that could potentially negative impact somebody's ability to work. So absolutely, making coaching more available. I wish every physician had a coach. I say if LeBron James gets a coach, and he probably has a lot of coaches, then our physicians need coaches. And so I know that there are not enough coaches in the world for all the physicians, but that's, something that in the coach community we're looking at. How do we scale and replicate the work that we're doing? Um, so I see a lot of institutions, and especially training institutions, that are working with coaches and providing coaching for their physicians and their trainees. There's a ton of research on how coaching improves financial profitability for organizations, reduces burnout among trainees, improves essentially every metric that organizations care about. Patient outcomes are better. Patients are happier. The productivity is higher. All of those things get better when physicians have access to coaching. So, the more that we can do that in our society, the better. And then physicians, again, ask for help. Don't feel like you have to go through this alone, because you're not alone. Whatever you're feeling, somebody either feels it or has felt it. Just reach out for help, reach out for support, because I think when we're in medical school and residency, we're in this container and this network of people that are all going through the same thing at the same time. And then I felt this for sure when I got out of training. I felt very isolated because a lot of times I was the only physician in the building, and I loved my staff, loved my team, but it wasn't like I could just go to the doctor's lounge and hang out with my buddies, talk about cases. And so, lean on your local county medical societies, your local professional associations, lean on your friends and your colleagues, lean on people outside of medicine. Let people in, let people help you. Don't neglect those relationships. So, those are some things that I think about to really, don't neglect your own needs. Don't apologize for eating.
Well, we've all done it. Like, think
Yeah.
about residency, especially. You go through times and they don't really build in, like, times to take care of the human body that you're living in. It's pretty important to do that. And as you're in your attending physician years, really, I mean, you've probably discovered the same thing I have. Nobody else is going to watch out for me. It has to be me. I have
Yes.
to say, okay, here's the boundary. I'm actually going to sit down and eat lunch today because I went probably a few years without eating any lunch. And that was not really good because then you don't get that time to sit back and reflect and kind of let your body reset and get ready for the next step.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of reflect back on some of these things we've talked about. We've talked about burnout. We've talked about the removing guilt as one of the motivators. We've talked about the idea of regaining control of your own life and your own time, because I think that's one of the biggest key factors on how to do this. Um, and I wondered, a little bit about the financial side of it. I think that's one of the things that is quite important for a person to be able to have true autonomy. they have to say, I'm not so constrained by financial limitations that I have to say yes to every single thing this employer says to me. And so, what would you tell people as they're planning kind of their financial life, whether they're a medical student, a resident, or in their attending physician years?
Yeah, I think so money is I was talking about this with I can't remember who. It was not a physician, but just why a lot of physicians are have um money issues, I guess for lack of a better term. And I struggle with this as well. So this is something I actively work on. As physicians, we tend to be very separated from money as a transaction. So we're going to see the patient there, and there are so many layers in between the patient paying whoever they pay, their insurance company, whatever. So we tend to not associate getting paid for what we do because it's not direct. It's not like you go to the mechanic and they say, well, it's going to be $300 to fix your car, and then they
Right.
pay you right there. So if money if you have trouble seeing money in that way, it's normal. I think not limiting yourself, and I see this a lot in physicians nowadays looking for income either within clinical practice or outside, but always thinking of what might be opportunities for additional income and not tying yourself to, well, I can only make money in this W-2 job. Um, but again, getting back to that framework about, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, could I moonlight? Could I write? Could I coach? Could I consult? Are there other things I could do? Could I become an expert witness? Other things that I could do that are utilizing my skills that are not necessarily tied to direct patient care, or if they are there other opportunities? And so just being very open to receiving money, making money in those ways that might not be kind of the traditional, I work from a 9 to 5 type thing. Um, and we as physicians discount our skills all the time. I mean, I hear this, I'm just a pediatrician. Like, no, gosh. Yeah,
Yeah, you're a board
I'm just,
certified, amazing
yeah,
person with this incredible
yeah.
skill set. Yeah.
Yes, you're a board certified physician with X many years of experience in healthcare. You know, you've treated this many patients, so know your worth and just yeah, don't limit yourself to what might be available in your current role or current job. Um, but always just keep those options open for other ways to earn income.
Well, when you look at published data from some like MGMA group or something, it will show primarily the W-2 income for people that
Hmm.
the doctors that we pay in this region, in this area, in this little spot. But you have to kind of, I think, have a little bit of an open mind. You have the ability to do revenue generating work in other areas.
Right.
You really have a lot of training as a physician, and like all those areas you mentioned are real. I've talked to people before employers who've said like, well, on this data it says this is how much you have to make. We can't pay you more or less than this. And you have to come back and say, well, I know my worth. This is what I'm doing. This is the amount of availability and the commitment of time. This is the list of things I'm doing for you. And you can work with your employer. Or if you say, look, the employer is constrained and they don't have latitude to make much of a change, then you can do 1099 work, or you can go
Hmm.
work like you said like you said, doing some things that are not really tied to the insurance industry, like coaching or writing, or go uh, do some other outside career. A lot of doctors use whatever capital they've gained in their clinical job, and they do something else. Or they invest it wisely, or they put it through a real estate thing, or whatever it may be. You want the money to work for you, so that it's not all 100% associated with just how many hours you are sitting there in front of patients.
Right. We need to stop trading time for money. And this is something I wish I had done years ago. You brought this up about really going to your employer and saying, this is the value that I'm providing you. I highly encourage all physicians to do that, to really understand what is the value that you're providing. Maybe not in a monetary way, but if you're bringing new patients to the practice, if you've been able to improve the diabetes, the A1Cs in your practice, if whatever that is, really be clear on the value that you're providing and you show that to your employer so that so that that's clear. And also just so you know for yourself, then if life changes and you need to have that information, it's readily available. But that's something I wish I had done early on. It's possible to go back and do it, but it can be a really, really helpful so that we know our worth.
Yeah. Well, and I think the cost to replace a physician is tens of thousands of dollars. The last statistic I heard was at least $50,000. But it may have, depending on what specialty and what area, it may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to
Hmm.
replace a physician. And so you don't go into your employer and be like all snarky and mad. You just say
Right.
like, this is the value I bring. This is the patient clientele that is loyal to this clinic and this facility or this institution because of the work that I do, and then know your value, and
Right.
don't ask for something that your employer can't meet, but don't just accept the first offer that they make, because they're very likely to offer you more if you want to remain with a W-2 job. And if you want to be locums or do 1099 type private contractor work, then the sky's the limit. You can negotiate whatever you want.
Right. And it might not even be money. It might be time. If it's an
Right.
extra admin half day or less call or
Yep.
something along those lines, maybe it's not necessarily money in your bank, but it's something that's valuable to you in that way.
Right. Your time is worth more than anything. And the
Yeah.
reason I bring up the money thing with this conversation, Laura, just like we talked about, is when you talk about burnout and you talk about this purpose, you have to, the finances have to be there so that you can make these life choices to do whatever you want. If you are still in your 50s and still have, $300,000 in medical school debt, it's hard to say no when your employer asks you to do something. But
Right.
if you play your cards right and you pay off the loans and you don't take on so much debt that you feel like you have to say yes, and you're, the golden handcuffed concept. If you can play those cards right, then later on in your career you have a lot of latitude to explore and change, and it sounds like that's pretty integral to what you're talking about with regaining power over your time, and with the resources that you are at your command.
Yeah, absolutely.
Laura, this has been inspirational. I've loved it. I'm so glad you put this in a book, and I'm looking forward to actually reading it. I'm excited to see what it says, and I'm hopeful that others will take motivation to check that book out and read it. And you've taught us a lot, so thank you so much.
Thank you for
Do,
having me. It's
oh
been
yeah.
great.
Do you have any final words of wisdom, things you would want to leave our audience with?
You're always a choice. You're never stuck, and reach out for help.
Love it. Thank you so much, Laura. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician, and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only, and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel, and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.